This is Travel Writers Radio, insightful stories from Australia and the world to inform, entertain and inspire your wanderlust.
Welcome to Travel Writers Radio podcast. I'm Kirsty Bedford, journalist, travel writer and editor.
And I'm Belinda Jackson, author, travel journalist and columnist, and we're your weekly co-hosts. Every week we'll bring you inspirational travel stories from Australia and the world, giving you first-hand perspectives of places you can visit and the cultures that make each destination so rich.
But first up, let's jump into what exciting things you have coming up, Belle.
I'm so excited. I'm off to Turkey for a really amazing women's-only expedition with Intrepid Travel. They've got a focus on supporting women's-only businesses through the tour, and a lot of those are also now raising money for those affected by February's horrific earthquake. We'll get a sneak peek into women's lives in the Ottoman era in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, and also take a look at the fabulous Greek ruins of Ephesus on Turkey's western coast. I used to know Istanbul quite well, but I haven't been back to Turkey for years, so it'll be really interesting to see how one of my favourite cities in the whole world is faring right now. But on to our travel tip segment. What have you got for us this week, Kirsty?
Thanks, Belle. This week, my tip is about hiring a local guide. The reasons are both economic and about ensuring you get the most out of your travel experience. And a few years ago, we actually took our boys to Vietnam and we asked the hotel for a guide to take us to Marble Mountains in Da Nang. And he took us there and then, which is incredible, by the way. And then when we left, we actually asked him if there were some other places that he could take us that were a bit less touristy and also some experiences that would give us a really authentic local experience. And he actually suggested we go on a bike tour around Kangaroo Island. So on that tour, which we did, he took us to some people's homes who he personally knew, and we were able to have a chat with them about their lives, and we met potters and fishermen and women crafting sleeping mats, and it was just an experience I will never ever forget.
So basically you cut out the middleman, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you also can buy directly from those locals you meet. So that's what we did when we were in Vietnam. So it's also just an amazing way to show our boys and show your children, if you're taking them along, the local way of life and immerse in a new culture. So how do you find them? I would say start by asking the hotel, and then Google is obviously always your friend, but of course do your homework.
Thanks, Kirst. That's a great tip. The crown jewel of Kangaroo Island is Southern Ocean Lodge, which was burnt down in bushfires 3 years ago. Kirsty Bedford talks to Hayley Bailey, the co-owner of Bailey Lodges, about how they've rebuilt one of Australia's most revered luxury lodges, literally from the ground up, and what you can expect when it reopens on the 6th of December.
Welcome to the show, Hayley.
Oh, hello. Great to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us. So let's start by just tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to launch Bailey Lodges.
Well, my husband and I started the business almost 20 years ago with our first property on Lord Howe Island, Capella Lodge, and we purchased that, and then we sort of set about to create a portfolio of high-end luxury lodges, with Longitude 131 coming into the portfolio after we built Southern Ocean Lodge on Kangaroo Island. So we had the three properties in the business that we actually then went on to sell in 2019, but we've retained Capella Lodge on Lord Howe personally, but we are still very much involved within the business still to this day, though, as the founders and creative directors.
Fantastic properties, and I have stayed at Longitude, and it was a truly remarkable experience watching Uluru from the bed, the huge king-size bed in my pavilion. So it's a stunning property. But let's focus today a little bit on Southern Ocean Lodge. So tell us a little bit about that property and why that sort of became so popular on Kangaroo Island.
So when we started our business, we looked around Australia for a place that already had, it was a destination in its own right, especially for international visitors. Kangaroo Island was one of those places. It had, it's Australia's Galapagos, it's a zoo without fences. There were a lot of international visitors coming, but there wasn't really a lot of accommodation, or especially high-end accommodation. There was a few bed and breakfasts and some house rentals. So we felt that it was a location that could be able to, to have a luxury lodge and a fully immersive experiential experience We knew that we had a market already going there, and so we just sort of had the analogy of build it and they will come, which is what actually happened, which is fantastic.
So the lodge did really quickly become and was multi-award winning and at a really iconic property. And then tell us a bit about what happened 3 years ago.
Well, it was absolutely devastating. The property had been operational for about 11 years, and then the bushfires of that 2019, 2020 summer came through the island and with devastating consequences, and Southern Ocean Lodge was lost to that fire. It was unprecedented, the amount of fuel that burnt on the island at that time. It was sort of a once in 100-year fire, and even though we did have what we thought to be some of the best firefighting and water management system, it wasn't enough to save the lodge, and it was completely obliterated, except for, strangely, the staff village. About 90% of that was still standing, so the fire had wrapped around where the staff all live, but had taken out the lodge in its wake. And for all of us, it was devastating. For our staff, especially, we even had 4 staff that were in the fire bunker as the fire went over them. And obviously they were all okay, but just devastating for them to come out of that fire bunker and to see the lodge ablaze and to know that there was no way of saving it. So it was devastating.
And did you have much warning? Did you know, or you obviously there was just no way of knowing the level of destruction that fire would cause?
Absolutely, but yes, we did have complete ample warning, and we were able to evacuate all of our guests. We stopped guests from arriving to the property. It was the beginning of January, so it was obviously at a very peak time for visitation. So we stopped any guests from arriving the day before, and then we evacuated all guests that were still remaining at the property that morning, and the fire hit later on that afternoon. So we had plenty of time, but we probably didn't realise the full extent. I mean, the spotter, they tried to have an aircraft to dump water, but the flames and the heat was just so great they weren't even able to do that. And the helicopter pilot that was leading the water bombing plane felt that the flames were 100 metres high, the wall of fire that was coming towards the lodge. So there was real. I've got goosebumps even just talking about it.
Oh, but, gosh, I just can't imagine. And was there any question in your mind? Once, I mean, obviously the initial shock and the devastation, but were you sort of, how quickly were you, or were you immediately thinking, right, we will rebuild?
Oh, absolutely. We were just absolutely personally devastated because something that we had created had burnt to the ground, but also because we'd actually sold Southern Ocean Lodge and Bailey Lodges to a private equity group in the US 9 months previous. And so we just felt even compelled, because we've sold them this asset, it's now burnt to the ground. And so we were completely pushing and really keen for them to definitely rebuild the property, and that we would lead the project and bring it back, which is what's happening right now, and what's incredibly exciting, because we are due to reopen Southern Ocean Lodge this December. So it's been quite a process over the last few years getting it back. The design development is essentially very, very similar to the original, but obviously there's many aspects that we've tweaked, knowing that we're obviously in this fire-prone area. Obviously, it'd probably be another 10 years before any kind of fire of any sort of magnitude could come back through, because of obviously the new growth, and it takes a long time for the Australian bush to fully recover. But we've got the best water management practice for firefighting. We've also planted fire-resistant succulent coastal vegetation within a buffer zone around the new lodge, so that that would obviously mitigate the fuel load that we had before. So there's been a number of measures that have been taken in, but we've just been incredibly lucky that our owners, KSL, wanted to see the lodge back, and everyone's just been so positive to be back on board and bringing it back to all of our visitors and guests at the end of this year.
And so, and while you were rebuilding that, and obviously all of the work going into it, you were still considering the community, and talk to us about the First In fundraiser program.
Well, that's been a really lovely project because we've worked with some of the groups that we've had a connection with. Maggie Beer and her, she's been a dear friend of the lodges. She's come over and done many of our food safari guest experiences. And she has an incredible foundation that does a lot of work with the food that is provided for aged care. Then we also have the Community Association on Kangaroo Island, so that helps young people go off and further their education on the mainland. And then, of course, the Royal Flying Doctor, which is just so incredibly important for all regional parts of the country, but especially South Australia. So we focused and we picked those three organisations, and then we ran a great auction for those guests that would like to be the first ones to come and stay at the lodge. And for the, instead of us taking the funds for that, we've given it to one of those three charities. There's three different stays, and we raised over $40,000, which was a great outcome.
And so tell us a little bit about what makes Kangaroo Island such an exceptional place for travellers to come to, and for those who are looking at coming back to Southern Ocean Lodge, what they can sort of do and see when they're there.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, for our international visitors, it's very much Australia's Galapagos, the zoo without fences, because you can see koalas in the wild and kangaroos in the fields. There's the amazing Australian sea lion and the fur seals down on the beaches, incredible flora and fauna, but also, especially for our Australian visitors, it's the most incredible food and wine experience. We have so many local producers, wineries, spirit houses, and we're able to really showcase incredible seasonal produce all year round at the property. So I feel we have a lot for our international guests, also for all of our local guests, because you can get out and do as much as you like and explore and go hiking and take the mountain bikes, go out with our naturalist guides and learn about the natural history, or you can actually just cocoon yourself at the lodge and enjoy the amazing food and wine experiences, and just going off on your own for a meander down the coast or down to the beach. So it's a very spectacular location. Next stop is Antarctica, where the lodge is positioned. So I feel that it's got a little bit of something for everyone.
Fantastic. And lastly, sort of tell us what are some of the future plans for you now, for what will happen once this is up and running, and what are your plans going forward in the travel industry?
Well, I think for Bailey Lodges, for James and I, the business has grown quite substantially in the last few years with other acquisitions like the Louise and the Barossa Valley and Silky Oaks Lodge up in the Daintree. There's been some international acquisitions, Hooker Lodge in New Zealand. So we'll continue to work on a lot of these redevelopments of these properties and refurbishments, because obviously that's one of the things that's always required in hospitality and tourism, is that you need to have your product at the absolute highest standard, so that whenever a guest arrives, they feel like, oh, it only just opened. They have that sense of feeling. So we love being part of that creative process and the design and development. And so we'll keep working in that space. But it is exciting to watch where the business will go in the future.
Fantastic. And having stayed at one of your properties, and hopefully many more to come, I can vouch for that. That certainly feels like, yes, that you're the first one to stay there, and the service is incredible. So thank you so much for your time today, and all the best with Southern Ocean Lodge and its phase 2.
Fantastic. It was so lovely to talk to you.
You're listening to Travel Writers Radio Podcast.
And now to Paris, where French cheesemonger Valerie Henbest speaks to Belinda Jackson. She gives her recommendations of the best places to buy and eat cheese. Valerie is the owner of Smelly Cheese Company in Adelaide Central Market, but returns to her homeland in France whenever she can.
You've gone back to your native France, and which is where you are at the moment in Paris. So thank you for taking the time to join us from Paris. But you're originally from Normandy, which is famous for its dairy produce. In fact, you even butter your buttered bread in Normandy, don't you? You're so obsessed.
It was an obsession, and it's interesting because being born there, I didn't realize that my life was entirely surrounded by cheese. It's only when I landed in beautiful Australia that I realized, hang on a second, it's not automatically following me. Where is it? And it was really the beginning of my career. I wasn't really doing anything linked to cheese before I left France, but landing in Australia made me think twice, and I just really had to do something for my own comfort and pleasure. And I started to go back to Normandy and gathered a few Camembert and lots of other cheeses. And here started a brand new adventure for me.
So I have to ask then, when you've gone back to the land of cheese, what was the first cheese that you ate when you arrived in Paris? What had you missed that you can't get in Australia?
Raw milk Camembert. So that's my obsession. And once you try the raw milk version of the Camembert, you know well, it's like you open a door of amazing flavor and texture, and it's really, you put Normandy in your mouth and you can breeze through the Normandy paddocks with the apple trees surrounding yourself. It's just that's the first thing I do for sure.
So you can't buy it in Australia at all?
Nope, forbidden. We don't let raw milk and cheese products unless they are semi-hard, like the Swiss-style cheeses, like Comté, Beaufort, Abondance, Gruyère. All those cheeses are very often imported in the raw milk form. That's the best form, and that's how you taste flavor and terroir, which is a beautiful word that the taste and the sense of place, and it's easier with raw milk cheeses.
Absolutely. So when you now that you're in Paris, where did you go to find it? Is it absolutely on every corner? Did you go down to your local market and just grab it there, or is there a place that you always find yourself gravitating back toward when you're in Paris?
It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure you've been in Paris many times, but you don't have to search very long at all. There is a cheesemonger at every corner, it's the same way you find a fresh baguette every 200 meters. You probably find a cheese every 500 meters, if that. So, it's not very difficult. Having said that, I have my favorite cheesemongers, cheese places, and yes, I will then direct myself more specifically and go and find those people that have such a knack at putting cheese together. It looks so good. They create different things. It's much better than a lolly shop for me.
So whereabouts do you find yourself gravitating? I mean, there's some really great hubs in Paris for food. I'm thinking in the second, and where's your heartland?
So at the moment, I'm in the first arrondissement. So we are really in the heart near the Louvre, and interesting enough, there's a brand new little fromagerie called La Fromagerie du Louvre, and it's located next to the royal cellars. So those two together, so you've got the wine, and that's the place where Louis XV was holding all his wine. There was tunnels underneath the Parisian streets that would go straight to the Louvre, the palace where the king was. And so the wine has always been there, but the cheese just appeared a couple of years ago, and they've created a beautiful little cheese shop. It's like and they're so proud. It's a bit like it's jewelry. It's prime. It's a prime a food component. It's presented in a beautiful way. It's cut in a precise manner. It looks like a piece of art everywhere you look, and so understandably, when you enter there, you just spend an enormous amount of money, because cheese is expensive in France as well, as you would know.
Oh, really? So it's just the same. We have the same expectation. And recently, when we met a couple of weeks ago at the Good Food and Wine Show in Melbourne, you were talking about the price of cheese and how it is a work. It has so much work in it. There's so much handwork that it has to be. You have to accept that there is going to be a price attached to that. So that's interesting that that it's the same in France because for some reason we think, that block of cheddar that we've all been eating for the last 20 or 30 years is like, wow, that's really expensive, isn't it? But
yeah. I mean, having said that, of course, you'll find that it's still expensive, but we don't have what kills us in Australia is the cost of freight, of course, which post-COVID has enormously. Right, I mean, the price has increased enormously, so we have a double whammy in Australia, obviously. But I'm always surprised. If you want a good product here, the artisanal products, they have a price. The price that, all those people, you spend more time, you have more care, you go and get it, you produce it in less quantity, therefore you can't sell it as cheap as some thing that is mass produced. So yes, you have to pay. You're gonna get what you pay for. It's absolutely true in France too.
Something rare and beautiful. And so
Exactly.
What do you find then when you are in Australia, when your shop, which is at the Adelaide markets, what do you find which cheeses do Australians gravitate toward?
It's interesting. So the Australians would definitely go towards the gooey, creamy type of cheese. And for the Australian, the crémeux d'Argental, I don't know if it rings a bell, but it's really those double creams, cow's milk that are really texturally quite decadent and very attractive. So in my shop, absolutely, crémeux d'Argental, hands down, we sell an enormous amount of it.
Oh, it sounds delicious.
That's it is. So then followed by the triple cream, so it's even more gooier, creamier. It's like it's very enticing, and you only need to grab your bottle of champagne to go with it. So yes.
Or you could put chocolate with it as well, couldn't you?
Yes, well done. Absolutely. The chocolate with the triple cream, especially with honeycomb. Oh, my goodness. You can live an experience for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, at this wine and cheese show, we had... for readers who have missed out, you can still do this at home with your triple cream. Add it to balance it on top of a dark chocolate coated piece of genuine honey, good honeycomb, and the smell of the honey made with real honey as opposed to just sugar. The scent of the honey, it just opened up like a flower. It was, for me, it was an absolute revelation.
You made my day because it was for us such a revelation as well. What we created with Vicky, the chocolatier, and how you elevate an experience to the next level, and it's so satisfying, isn't it? You can do so much with cheese and chocolate.
Oh, it's such an astonishing, a really interesting pairing. And we might put in the episode notes a couple of the pairings that we made with the blue cheese, with the Roquefort, and then the Comté as well, which were both paired with really interesting things. And that's interesting. Comté is actually the biggest seller in France. While you're saying that where Australians are coming to your shop and buying the triple creams, buying the super gooey, creamy, really decadent I mean, these are things you have on the weekends, as a treat. It's not what the French would eat every day, is it?
No. So definitely in France, we would go primarily for the Comté. So the Comté would be number one by far. And it's the most eaten cheese by the French, and it still is. It's been for years, and I think it's very it's an incredible attractive cheese. It's also coming in so many various ways. The cheese that changes with season is the cheese that you can buy one day. If you buy it 3 weeks later, it might be completely different. The cheese that has a story, is alive, and you can follow its life for all year round. So it's quite something. Plus, it's a balance.
That's about when you're talking about the variation of flavour. That's about what the dairy cattle are eating at the time when the season changes from the fresh spring grasses to later in the season, and the lush summer pastures changes the texture of the cheese. Can you buy that? Can you see that change in Australia? Do we have enough cheese coming through that you can say, yes, this is something from earlier in the year? Or do you have to go back to France to find that sort of seasonality?
No, seasonality should also affect Australian product, but the difference is not as big in Australia because the animal they spend most time outdoors anyway. I think compared to the French animals that would go to a stable condition like indoor and be fed hay and fermented food. But having said that, the seasons are also something that's real in Australia, obviously, so you should be able to test it. But interestingly, I don't think the Australians are connecting enough or strongly with what's happening with the cheese at the moment. And I know I do a lot of work with Kim Master from Section 28, and he really follows the cycle of the cows he's getting the milk from. He works enormously with the dairy farmer, and I think that's exactly what's going to be more understood, this real collaboration with the dairy farmers, the effect that everything will affect the cheese, and that is something that needs to be better understood, better worked with. I think the hundreds of years of traditions in France make that it's a completely accepted fact. In Australia, I think we need to pay more attention to that and maybe develop this understanding and develop this idea of marketing as well. If you tell your customers, pay attention, did you buy a winter cheese or did you buy a summer cheese? Let's find a difference together. You need to wake up the customers and make them pay more attention on their palate and their taste buds and their nose, and their experience going to be a lot more interesting.
That was Belinda Jackson with cheesemonger Valerie Henbest. Visit Adelaide's Central Market where you'll find her cheese shop, Smelly Cheese Company.
Fiona Harper is a travel writer and long-distance runner and recently ran in the women's-only trail race, the Thelma and Louise Marathon in Utah. Fiona tells Graham Kemlow about her 3-day recovery session in the luxurious Ullum glamping retreat near Moab before returning to New Orleans.
So, Fiona, where are you right now?
I'm currently sitting in the city of New Orleans.
Oh, okay. Can you hear Hello Guthrie's song in the background?
Well, it's funny. I'm in my hotel at the moment, but down on the street there's music everywhere, which is, I haven't been to New Orleans before, and I was hoping to be absorbed in the music, and that's exactly how it's been. Every street corner, every bar, every restaurant, there's music. It's fabulous.
It does sound fabulous. It's another one of the places on my bucket list too. So.
You must get here.
Yeah, well, there's so many places in the world still to see, so little time.
I know.
Now, I wanted to talk to you about, I heard you ran this. Well, people who regularly listen to our show will know that Fiona is actually a whippet, and she has been seen running at all sorts of different events. Not really a whippet, but you're a very, very good runner, and you've done Boston, you've done New York. What is the Thelma and Louise Marathon, for goodness sake?
Well, it's interestingly, so Tom Hanks and I actually have at least one thing in common, and we both run
being rich.
Yeah, we don't have that in common, sadly, but we have both run through Utah. So anyone who was have seen Forrest Gump
that's Utah,
might,
is it?
yeah. So when he decided after however many days, months that he'd been running, that he was going to stop, that was actually in Utah. So we've run the same ground, Tom Hanks and I. So I was there just recently to run the Thelma and Louise Marathon.
So is the idea that you're trying to get to Mexico?
Yeah, well, I would rather fly, truth be known.
Was it on? But now, you're a bit of an off-road specialist with your four-wheel drive legs. What was this particular marathon? Was it on the tar or?
Yeah, no, very much off-road. So it's themed on Thelma and Louise because Thelma and Louise a lot of that was filmed in Utah as well.
Right.
In the Moab area, which is down in the southeast near the Colorado border. And so the idea is that it's a women's only trail running event. So there's an ultra marathon, which is 50K. There's a marathon, a half marathon, and a 15K. Mm-hmm. And it's all about women, supporting women, and like having that camaraderie that Thelma and Louise had through their adventure through the desert.
You didn't run off a cliff though, did you?
No.
Thank goodness.
No. no, thankfully we had a happy ending.
So were there other Aussie women running, Fiona?
No, there wasn't. It was all mostly Americans, a few European women, but predominantly probably 98%. So there's about 400 runners in the 4 different distances, and predominantly American.
Invite only, or how did you get a Guernsey?
No, anyone can enter. The reason why I entered was it was on the date that I was looking for a run to do before I was going off to a conference in San Antonio in Texas. So I basically threw a dart at the board and said, "Where's a run that I can do on this weekend in America?" And the Thelma and Louise Marathon came up trumps.
So, and what was it like running with the sisters? Was there a bit of elbowing in the ribs? How did you get the position?
No, it's very friendly, very laid back actually. So it's a trail run, so it's through the Moab desert, and anyone who has seen the Thelma and Louise or Tom Hanks or the Western, like the John Wayne Western movies would be familiar with the landscape. So it's very barren, and then there's these amazing rock formations that kind of rise out of nowhere. So that's the landscape that we're running in. So it's off-road, it's dirt, down into canyons, down through riverbeds.
What about the cacti, Fiona? I lived in Arizona for a while. There are cactuses down there that actually throw spikes at you.
Well, I didn't actually see any of them. So the landscape, lots of wildflowers actually. So it's just coming into the wildflower season, and the trees. So no cacti apart from kind of stunted, very small cacti, but a lot of stunted trees that were kind of almost fossilized. Hard to call them trees.
No water there.
Yeah. Okay. Although the water has carved the landscape, so over the years, the canyons and the chasms have been carved by the water. But at this time of the year, it's very dry and very hot.
I was going to ask. I imagine it'd be hot and a lack of humidity, which is a bit of an issue for runners.
Yeah, and the dust and the elevation probably are all the challenges that we faced, as well as the sun. Although it wasn't, by Australian standards, it wasn't that hot. It was, probably low 30s by the time.
15% humidity, you lose fluids without realising.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a very dry, sapping heat. Yeah.
And what about any wildlife encounters? Anything with a rattly tail?
No, they were on my mind, those snakes, but didn't see any wildlife at all, actually.
Okay. Well, you obviously hopped over.
Yeah. I think that, they heard us coming and got out of the way.
Oh, they like to do that.
Yeah.
So what was sort of best time? What would you expect to do? A normal marathon is what, 3 and a bit hours? For a trail run, is it that much slower?
Yeah, it's very much slower. And in fact, I didn't do the marathon. I signed up for the 15K because I hadn't done the training. But the first marathon runners came in just under 6 hours, I think it was. Okay. Yeah, and that's indicative of how tough the terrain was.
Twice tough almost, yeah?
Yeah.
Have you got a marathon, more traditional marathon to run somewhere this year? Or have you done
well, no, you've never done enough.
Oh.
I haven't got one planned. My travel schedule is quite hectic for the rest of the year, so it's very hard to train for a marathon while I'm moving around all the time. So I'm not sure. I might find a sneaky little half marathon somewhere.
Okay. I know you did well. I don't think we've spoken to you in New York, have we?
I don't think we have. No.
New York, didn't you? Didn't I get a note to say you'd run a good time?
Well, I finished New York. That was my main goal, and I had a good time. That was I had no intention of running it fast because I wanted to get maximum value for my entrance fee in New York. So I did.
Look around.
Well, that's right. I took a lot of photos. Yeah, I high-fived the crowd. I had a few drinks. It was a lot of fun.
You weren't shooting Instagram things on the way, were you?
Well, I was taking photos and writing a story in my head.
Tell me, do you run at a particular cadence?
Yes.
Beats a minute? How do you?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah, and the cadence is key actually to running a marathon. Not so much on a trail run, but on a road run. Yeah. Ideally.
What's your favourite track, Fiona?
Well, I usually don't listen to music. Well, not anymore. I know my cadence, and ideally it's about 175 to 180 steps per minute is how it's kind of figured out. So it is quick, yeah. And that's the most efficient way to run. You use less energy. The shorter, faster steps that you use means that you use less energy.
And how do your feet come up? Like you end up with black toes? Or what sort of downside of it?
All I can say to that is toenails are so overrated.
Okay.
No, you don't love a runner for their feet.
What about this? Is there a story round about shoes that do more than just help you along the way? Is there some, like the fast swimsuit, is there some dodgy shoes out there that you can buy?
Oh, well, allegedly. I don't think they're legal, but, you know, I think when it comes to, you know, the age groupers, which I'm in, so the non-elite runners, you know, like we're not in it to break a time. We're there to finish the run and, you know, not break anything, particularly on a trail run, and come out of it with 10 toenails intact if you can.
A major benefit. So you don't think sort of high-density foam or springy insoles are going to help you?
I don't think any of that helps when you've been running for 4, 5 or 6 hours. The gloves are off and it's basically hope for the best.
I admire your persistence. You know? I know you're in the 21-plus age group, so, you know, good on you, and crossing the finish line with a couple of your sisters. Yeah,
it's a wonderful way to see the world, and it certainly gives you a unique perspective of, you know, the places that I've run. It's a fabulous way to see somewhere new and to meet new people, new runners, and particularly for Thelma and Louise, you know, because it was all women, the atmosphere was very different to any other run that I've done because it's all women, and theme was, you know, supporting women. So yeah, it was fabulous, a lot of fun. Well, sometimes, you know, when I'm doing those runs, I think, oh my God, why don't I just walk? You know, why do I sign up to run a marathon? It would just be so easy to walk.
And what did you do? Did the girls all go out for a drink after the race?
No, I actually went to a glamping resort after the run, a beautiful spot called Ullum, which is part of the Under Canvas group. So they had just opened a new glamping resort, which was just south of Moab. So I went down there for 3 days and just
hot springs and things. What's the benefit?
Oh, absolutely. Hot springs, yoga classes, beautiful glamping tent with a wood-burning stove, king-size bed. It was cool at night, yes.
So the high desert is cool at night?
Yeah, so a desert kind of climate where it's hot during the day and then cold, clear night. So, yeah, it's also a dark sky area. So the nights are, you know, clear and cloudless mostly. So you've got these amazing starscapes in the sky at night. So, you know, sleeping in a tent with a wood-burning stove and then, you know, ducking out onto my veranda during the night to just sit and gaze at the stars that was my rest and recovery and recuperation.
Well, that sounds absolutely sensational.
Yeah, and being in, you know, Utah, the landscape is so otherworldly to stay in somewhere where you are, you know, staying out in the desert, so you're really in touch with the land and the landscape. Yeah, it was quite special.
Graham Kemlow spoke to Fiona Harper in New Orleans, where the music and the food completed her marathon recovery.
And that brings to a close Travel Writers Radio podcast for this week. For more stories, click to subscribe to our podcast on our website, travelwritersradio.com. I'm Kirsty Bedford.
And I'm Belinda Jackson. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Travel Writers Radio podcast. Please subscribe at travelwritersradio.com and follow Travel Writers Radio on Twitter and Instagram.